To get the most out of AI, we need to take our prompting game up a few levels. This video is the longest in this series and a masterclass on prompting. You'll probably want to stop and take notes as we go. The first example is a personal prompt, which gives the LLM your context so it has a better idea how to help you. This is my personal prompt. It introduces me to the LLM, tells it my name, doesn't tell the LLM how I want to get my answers. That's in the system prompt coming up next. This just tells it my context, name, interest, and how I like to learn and work. Note the end. I am preventing the LLM from giving me back a long list of what I just told it. So next you want to create a system prompt that tells it how to work with you. And there are lots of examples of system prompts online. This is one I've created that I put in at the beginning of every day. Actually, probably paste it in about twice a day. And that gives me better answers and more consistent answers every day. I worked with Grok to actually make this prompt into a compact system prompt that I use, and it's available in the video notes if you're interested. Be sure to include a rules section with things to do and things not to do. And again, at the end, it says, got it? Give a very short acknowledgement. Otherwise, you'll get an earful of long stuff that it just telling you back. I've tried a lot of ways to limit long answers, and this is probably the best. Just say a Spartan tone of voice. And that generally worked for most situations. One important thing about system prompts is that they will decay. ChatGPT recommends entering a system prompt about every 30 minutes of work. And more often if the task is complex or if it's starting to wander off topic or whenever you change subjects to maintain continuity and prevent it from guessing too much. You should also almost always say how many words you want the output to be. I'm used to asking for about 250 words at the beginning of most of my prompts, and then I can always get more if I want. Models allocate probability mass by structure first, semantics second, so they'll write to fit rather than writing and then chop it down. And then I combine both. I store both the personal and the system prompt together in one file, and I just cut and paste that into my LLM, actually about twice a day. So context prompt. Always say what the context is. If it doesn't know, it's going to guess, and it's probably going to guess wrong. So say, I'm working on a presentation. This is the goal. These are the people. This is what you should do and should not do, but I want you to understand my ultimate outcome for the result here. Direct instruction is usually one quick line that asks very specifically for something, and I almost always ask, just give me the top 5 points or give me the top 3 points. I don't want it to go on and on. Role-based prompts are popular. You've probably heard about them. You are John Ioannidis, the Stanford expert on metastudies, evaluating new medical papers with his usual skepticism. You are Gary Taubes. You are Brian Caplan, is one of the best. There are a bunch of others like that. You are Nassim Taleb. You are Richard Feynman. These are some of my favorites. You can also specify who will be consuming the output. For example, this article is for a lay audience, 40 to 70 years old, who will have some international travel experience. This really helps target the answer much better than it would just without saying that. Router forcing is interesting. An LLM app looks like it's just one LLM, but now, since the launch of GPT-5, it's actually choosing behind the scenes which LLM to use based on the question you ask or the request you give it. So if you say, think hard about this, that will trigger it to give a different LLM that has more in-depth. It may cost more, and their goal is always to save money. So they default to a fairly quick answer that doesn't take that many cycles. Think carefully. I want you to use deep research mode. These all matter because they will switch the LLM that is working on it. And if you don't need it, don't ask. Counterexample, list 3 reasons this might be wrong. I use this probably once a day. I'm always looking for, I always want it to ask itself whether it's overcorrecting and see if it can self-correct. Make it do the work. Hidden variables are actually a problem that LLMs often won't surface. So it's part of a chain of reasoning approach. Get it to give you its assumptions before going ahead. Asking a model to quantify uncertainty helps prevent it cascading effects and keep it on track. Try to make that local so that it just uses it when you ask and not always giving you its uncertainty numbers every time it answers anything, because that gets annoying. Paste stuff in, paste documents in. I was working with the Shopify assistant and I said what it told me to look for wasn't there, and it kind of argued, and so I just showed it a screenshot and said, here, this is what I'm looking at, and then it immediately understood and gave me the right instructions. So take screenshots, paste them in, paste in any documents or images that may help. Use a rules section. I have a rules section in my prompt. You'll see words like must, important, always. Have a do's and don'ts section in your prompt. You can give 1, 2, or 3 examples. It's often the case that 2 examples are better for a long assignment, for example. It gives more possibilities, but it also helps the LLM understand more what you're looking for. Ask the LLM to make the prompt. I actually did this earlier today. Use current best practices to give me the best prompt to accomplish my goal. Here's my goal. Help me figure out the prompt. Ask me any questions you need to, and then give me the final prompt. And then just paste it right back in or paste it into another LLM and compare. You could also give it a previous prompt and ask it to help make that prompt better. You can also, by the way, ask it to make any prompt shorter, and you'll be surprised how much fluff it cuts out. The length of the prompt does matter, and it saves money. Don't say no A writing. It has no idea what to do about that. Say something very clear, like a National Geographic article, or I use National Geographic. I also use The Atlantic. Clear, story or example at the beginning, evidence. You can ask it to cite your claims or not, because sometimes it does too many citations. But really dial in all the things you want and don't want and give it a style guide rather than say no AI writing. All right, so a prompt that tells it to ask before proceeding can save a lot of unnecessary hassle. I asked it a tax question the other day about money coming from Switzerland, and it started by saying, I assume you're a Swiss citizen living in Switzerland. And I said, no, I had to interrupt it. Interrupting, by the way, is another good thing to do. Interrupt if you see some long stream of stuff coming out that you're not going to read, just interrupt it. And then I told it, no, I'm not a Swiss citizen. I live, in Maryland, and this is my tax situation. So tell it to ask you whenever it needs more information to give you a good answer. Head-to-head answers often help you and the LLM both realize that there are different options. So answer the way you think is best, but then independently answer in a different way, ignoring the first answer, and then you can ask it to reconcile, or you can discuss the 2 answers first. Point-wise confidence. LLMs become overconfident one little step at a time. And so you can ask it to walk through its statements and give a confidence interval for each statement. And that keeps it in a narrower range and prevents cascading silliness. Don't make this a system prompt or you'll get confidence numbers everywhere, but ask for at each stage, see if you can understand its confidence and pare back so you can try to keep it in a narrower range. Iterate your prompts. Keep working on them, improving them, score them. You could actually keep them in Excel, keep them in a Word document, keep them in a Google Docs. I keep mine in Notion, and you can look at the results. You try a couple of different prompts head to head, see the results, and then score them, or just throw out the ones that are working worse and use the ones that work better. Definition of done. A lot of people don't think about this. A lot of times you can say iterate until the requirements are met. LLMs do better when they make more passes. Encourage them to make more passes, to go and review their work, not just to think hard, but to do it once and then not display it, but to revisit it and check their assumptions and double check whether their answer makes sense, and then tell it what the definition of done is. And that's something we use in software, and it's something we can use in prompts all the time. When you work on an image, it's going to make a lot of mistakes. Break up the process. Do it the way you'd work with an artist. Work on a sketch first. Get the sketch right. Then have the AI render the sketch into a final product later. And that may also take several steps, one at a time. And just for fun, I'm going to show a few of the iterations I went through to make the training illustration in another video. It's always making mistakes. A lot of times you like what's going on, but then gravity is turned around the wrong way, or things are going the wrong way, and you're not getting what you want. So start with a sketch. This is actually a sketch that led me to this, which turned into part of the final solution, which worked out great. And then this was another part of it that also worked. And it was because I just took small steps and I kept it in a narrow range so it wouldn't get too far off and other things wouldn't break when I was fixing one thing up in the foreground. For example, the background would not break. Adversarial collaboration. Take the output of a query or a request and give it to another LLM and ask it to flag any problems or especially omissions, because it's hard to know what an LLM left out. And this is especially good for legal work like contracts. My gosh, you can write what looks like a good contract, but then go check it with another one. Always include Claude in this because Claude has the best logic. It's also helpful for scientific or engineering work. Another pair of eyes, and you're going to find out you left out some important things, or it did. And a few back and forth iterations between LLMs can really sharpen your output. I do this all the time. I usually say, what would Milton Friedman say? I say that probably a couple times a day. What would Richard Lindzen say? How would Scott Sumner see this situation? That's for economics. You can add all your experts into your system prompt and have those voices drive most of the answers, but that can get a little cluttered and you don't want it always citing various experts. So I do put some of those names in my system prompt, but I also will ask often, is this what Richard Feynman would say? Use your voice. Almost all LLM apps have a little microphone icon. Talk with the LLM rather than type. Often the desktop apps have a mic, but don't talk back. You have to read their response after you speak to it, but you can read faster than it talks anyway. So as soon as you get the gist of what it's saying, just interrupt it and ask your next question. Don't wait, even if it's still printing out more words. It'll stop and listen to your next question. For a quick Q&A, I usually grab my phone and ask the GPT app on the phone. The prompt and the accent and the voice is so good and natural, and it's especially good for asking questions on the go. Chain of Thought asks it to actually print out the steps, either that it's using for the previous prompt or that it's going to use for the next prompt. And if you're not getting good results, ask it to explain its thought process. Then you can discuss the thought process, modify the thought process, and then tell it to use the new thought process, and you'll probably get a better result that way. So for creativity, this comes from Stanford researchers who found a way to get it to prompt an LLM out of the box and to try some new exciting things. And they call it verbal sampling. So ask the LLM for 5 very different responses across the spectrum of possible responses, from low to high. And we'll get into what this is called in a minute. So when you ask it for something like a title or a poem or a name you're working on, have it generate 5 different responses across a range. And then you'll be able to see the responses that are more narrow range and more wide. And then finally say, pick some samples at random from the full distribution, and such that the probability of each response is less than 0.1. That just means take it out of different buckets and nothing too similar. A new feature from Anthropic are called skills. You'll create a set of skill prompts and store them. So when you're prompting, you can just call a skill by name rather than repeating instructions. We're going to use this kind of modular prompting approach more and more, especially as we work with other systems, images, videos, exploring other, databases and so forth, because this modular approach gives us leverage. Once we define a library of prompts and skills, the LLM itself can switch prompts or skills in real time to do whatever it needs to do at the time. You can even imagine an interface with a drop-down of your pre-made prompts. So just as you make your request, you could just pull the ones that are relevant rather than typing a bunch of stuff. Instead of typing stuff, use shorthand. You can get away with a lot of shortcuts in prompts. LLMs will understand almost anything you try to say. You don't need to say please or thank you. And you never need a question mark for questions. You can always figure out a question. You don't need much punctuation. And spelling mistakes are fine. I just let them go. Here are some common shortcuts you can use. And pause here. I'm going to show you several different shortcut pages now. And just, for example, use Y for yes and N for no. It always gets that. So make it do the work. And if you just sort of do some close enough gibberish, it often figures it out. These are fairly common shortcuts that we use in texting, and they all work. Now, these are some that a lot of people don't know. These are LLM Pro Insider prompts. If you're really into advanced prompts, stop the video here and play with some of these, make some notes. You can ask your favorite LLM for a list of prompts and it'll give it to you. And you see the reset, that's a great one because often you're kind of thrashing going back and forth and it's getting worse. And so you just tell it to reset and then you're going to paste the same prompt in again, but you're going to start getting a different answer instead of going in circles. I actually use the reset prompt probably a couple times a day. Draw a flow chart. It can do that. Give me the risk. All of these are very, even at Spartan just tells it Spartan tone without anything else. Just ask it for at chain and it'll show you its chain of thought. These are super useful. So try to not only use them, but come back and get more and use all of these as you level up your prompting game. These are some prompts that take a word afterwards. For instance, save will remember the project, and then you can ask for a JSON summary of the project, which I use for storing. For if I want to paste it into another LLM, I'll ask for a JSON or a markdown prompt to file to save. Or just if I'm making a lot of progress and we've really done a lot of work, I'm going to ask for a JSON file that saves what it knows right then, because maybe a couple weeks later, I'm going to come back to it and I can just upload that file instead of say, remember when we were working on that project? And it's going to say, sure, I remember, but it might not remember everything. So get it to give you a dump of what all the hard work you've just been doing for the last day or two. And then you can always come back to it. Now, plus you kind of have it saved as a snapshot, which I think is helpful because later you may go down some wrong roads or get it to, try some things and think some things. And I realize, this isn't working. You can just reset and go back and upload the previous save and go from there. So it's kind of like software in that sense. And the same with recalling and loading a previous project. But the temp, you have to know the temp secret. The temp is variance. So temp 0.2 is low randomness. And if you say temp is 0, then it's always going to give you the number one next word that is highest ranked. So you won't get any variability there. But 0.2 is very low randomness. So it's going to give you answers there's not much chance to wander and almost no chance of hallucination. It might not be that good in some sense, depending on what you define good as. Temp 1.0 tends to be fairly standard, and that's kind of baked in. But you can say temp 0.8, and that will just make it a little less likely to hallucinate. And it's actually not a bad way to start your day in your system prompt. And then, for creative teams, if you're doing names, if you're working on something, where you're looking for variance, use temp 1.8 and you'll get all kinds of crazy ideas. And then go back. You can really mess around with temp and change the output quite a bit. So prompting I do in Markdown. I like to save prompting in Markdown. Markdown is easy to learn. It's just a series of hash marks 1, 2, and 3. And I think 3 is about I think there might be a 4th level, but most of us just use 3 levels. That gives you a lot. And then save your prompts in Markdown. This will automatically sort of translate to bullet points, which I don't like. I'd rather save and use Markdown as my kind of a source code for prompts. And that way, so you can explain it, you can share them with people. But a lot of systems will just turn that into bold headings and bullets. So, and either one is really semantically the same. Use a prompt database. Go to the Apple Store or whatever the Google Store is called, I forget, and just typed in prompt manager, and you'll see like 20 or 30 of them. Most of them are free. They have some extra features. You can use, again, whatever you like. I like Notion. So everything in my world is in Notion, and I have a prompt database page that I just keep that open with a tab and go in and grab the prompts I want. And I put both system and personal prompts together, and then I just cut and paste that pretty often. Don't forget to use a copy clip, a clipboard manager. So you can go back and search previous things you copied into your clipboard, especially on the Mac. It's called Copy Clip. There's a few others. And then you can just search for a previous prompt by keyword, and then it's loaded and you don't have to go anywhere. So that's a huge time saver for everything. Always use a clipboard manager for all your cutting and pasting. So this wraps up the prompting course. You can take my current prompt from the show notes below this video, and let me know in the comments if you've got any other exciting prompting tips, because I expect to keep making more videos and helping more people learn to become more professional prompters all the time.